My next guest is Nancy Mancilla, co-founder and CEO of ISOS Group, a sustainability management services firm. Since starting this company in 2008, they were like way out there early on thinking about sustainability. Now we're all doing it, but like there were some leaders in the past. Nancy's been developing sustainability strategies as well as advising experts in the ESG disclosure space. Nancy, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us and smartening us up on this. Like my big thing is, you know, when I was kind of trying to learn about ESG, and I have friends, you're probably common friends with you, who've been working on laying down the framework and the planks of this discussion many years ago. But more of the world has come in. I mean, it's kind of the story I just said. It used to be a boutique. Now you folks have scale in this. And I'm just interested in if I don't know how to ask this. Is there a difference between those who are credibly determined to be contributors in the ESG space and those that are faking it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it comes up oftentimes, right? We keep hearing this term greenwashing. And I would say anyone who is going through the process of enabling ESG disclosure in their organization knows how hard this is. And so it's very difficult, actually, by the end of the day, to really greenwash. And using credible standards and frameworks in the world really enable true disclosure. And so even if the companies aren't able to get to the point that they would like to be, to the sexier side of sustainability, they're doing what they can to disclose how they're deploying good management practices and trying to be a good corporate citizen. So I'd say it's easier to criticize from the outside looking in that something is greenwashed unless, those who have gone through the process can really see how much it takes.
Well, I don't know if you heard my conversation with Representative Juan Vargas, but I was sort of surprised there wasn't more of a kind of framework or requirements of some sort on disclosure, that it just sort of seems to be, an open field, unregulated right now. He's trying to change that. Are you in support of what Juan Vargas is putting on the table?
Well, it would be great to connect with Juan Vargas, given that we're in the same district. But I would say that I totally support regulating this type of disclosure. We're starting to see hints of that come through. I mean, as of last year, the SEC introduced requirements for human capital management disclosure. And a lot of those labor-related items are those that are also found as material in sustainability reports, for instance, by companies. So even though it has been a very voluntary activity, we are now at nearly, I believe, 95% of the S&P 500 that are producing non-financial or ESG disclosure. So they've made it a common practice of doing business. And it's also required now more and more so by, say, providers of capital. They're using ESG factors as their screening criteria. So it's almost like, in order to play in the game, to play in the market, this is a requirement. So I would say regulations are just catching up in the United States, and I wholeheartedly support that, just as the EU has gone in that direction as well.
One of the really interesting things is, I think probably around, who knows if I'm right on this, but in 2008 or, go back to the last century, when you're in this space, those companies that I think the general prevailing wisdom, say you were reading the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, is those companies that wanted to engage in sustainability, that were trying to clean up their act, were putting themselves at an economic disadvantage to companies that were just swimming low, that were not investing. One of the things that your company, your ISOS group, does is to create value through this. And so I'm really interested in the changing economic model, how that old assumption has been flipped. And today, you actually are a loser if you're not in the ESG space, that the value creation there is a powerful incentive to move forward. Am I getting that right?
Yep, perfect. And I think you've done your homework, obviously. Early on, it was really just a Nike or Coca-Cola's of the world that were producing this type of disclosure based on the negligence, that they encountered from operating abroad. And now it is really all types of companies, even B2Bs that you would never have heard of. And they see that it is really the platform for converging with business partners, with investors, with community groups, any stakeholder that they're working with in order to prove the case that their business is a good corporate citizen, a good player, a good partner, that they're ethical, that they can be counted on for the reduction of any potential risks in their supply chain. That's a big one that keeps coming up. And that's how we're starting to see this paradigm shift. This is becoming much more strategic rather than, a nice to have of the earlier days. I would say also, we're seeing a big hole that was void being filled now by the small to medium-sized enterprises. So where this effort was led by large corporations and mainly multinationals, we're now seeing it across the board, and of course, the smaller to medium-sized firms, including privately held companies. So it becomes a values-driven effort. They realize that this growing population of millennials and younger really want to put their money where their hearts are. And they want to work as well for companies that they side with their values. And so if the companies aren't making this shift, they're going to lose out on their human capital, their talent pipeline. They're going to lose out on business opportunities. They're losing out on funding opportunities. And so it really does require, luckily that's caught the attention of executives and board members alike. And they're requesting this, whereas before it was one lonely soldier internally that really wanted to champion this on top of their already busy schedule.
Nancy, just real quick, we have a question from the audience. It's Jim Whitehead. He's the CEO of International Society for Sports Psychiatry. He says, how can ESG be made more supportive of all economic sectors? And I think you basically implied it is in all economic sectors, but you can answer, Jim. But I'm going to piggyback and say, where is ESG not penetrating to the level that it should?
I would say for the consumers themselves. I think that's the hardest piece of the puzzle to bridge in, because even though, as I just mentioned, the younger generation wants to side with organizational values, they don't quite understand how to use the information that's being published by these companies, nor do the companies know how to then summarize this information into bite-sized pieces that can be easily digested by the consumer. So I think that's still a major hurdle. And if this does become more regulated, I can expect, or at least that's my vision, is that we will see on product labeling, for instance, and that's consumer-facing products, like GHG footprints or life cycle, analysis just summarized. But in the other business areas, I would say it's just a matter of closing the gap on that educational piece.
Interesting. What does ISOS stand for?
Well, we had originally thought that it was twofold. So one, the isosceles triangle, and then secondly, implementing sustainability as an operating solution. So I think we were a little bit ahead of our game, because it really took big push for the first few years of our business to educate the marketplace, to build the market in the United States. And so we did a lot of education and training. And only in the last few years have things really flipped, where companies are now operationalizing sustainability. So that's exciting.
So now your title has traction. Fascinating. Right. Nancy Mancilla, co-founder and CEO of the ISOS Group. Thanks so much for joining us today. This was great.
Thank you for having me.